I'm now delighted to welcome Adam Spielman, who's very kindly going to talk about clinical trials from a patient perspective. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you very much, Nona. And I thought that talk from Mary, I thought was wonderful. So thank you for listening. I should say a little bit about why I'm here. So I'm going to talk much more about clinical trials than about me. But I have polycythemia. I'm 58. I was diagnosed about 16 years ago. I guess I'm always slightly embarrassed about talking about my experience of PV, but I think it's a really important one for anyone who's newly diagnosed. And that is, it hasn't really affected my life much. I have known about it. When I was first diagnosed, it was a worry, actually more for my wife than for me, because I've never particularly felt ill. I sometimes feel tired, but I don't know whether that's because I'm getting older or because of a PV. I've just moved on to pegylated interferon, and I'm glad to say that the side effects are barely noticeable. Now, I am really, really sympathetic, but a lot of people have a much worse time with MPNs. But my message about my history, if you're newly diagnosed, this may have, I mean, nobody wants an MPN, but it may have a very limited impact on your life. I'm also a patient rep on one of the main clinical trials. Some people call it mithridate. I call it mithridate because it sounds more Greek. It's a clinical trial. Basically, it's trying to work out for people with PV, what's the best treatment? Is it this new drug? And all drugs, by the way, have these really complicated and long names, ruxolitinib, or should you be on what's currently the best thing? I also, I suppose part of the reason why I'm here is my day job. I basically work in a think tank in the city, and I'm head of a future of health. And so I think about how healthcare will change on a 20-year view worldwide, which is really interesting. Anyway, so clinical trials. Let's see if I can get this to work. It's really important to understand for patients why clinical trials exist. And by the way, I'm a huge advocate, and you'll hear this again and again and again. The key point, and I'm sorry to hit you over the head with this in sort of black and white, the only way of knowing if a treatment works and if it's safe is through clinical trials. There is simply no other way of knowing. Every single drug that you use, every time a doctor gives you a bit of advice, it is because there have been clinical trials in the past. So take one just random thing we heard this morning. Dr. Shapiro said something about HRT, that it does cause, isn't affected or affects thrombosis, but not if you take it with a patch. How does she know that? The only way she knows that is because there has been a trial. People have literally tried this out and found out if it works. Drugs cannot be given to anyone unless they've been through a clinical trial. The only way that you know something is safe is putting it into a human. There is simply no other way of doing it. And here's another point, because lots of people don't get this. Researchers, scientists, doctors will only do clinical trials if they genuinely have really strong reason to believe that the drugs or the therapeutics are safe and effective. They do not try it beforehand. I hear again and again, people don't want to do these things because they don't want to be guinea pigs. And there's this sort of myth with scientific things that are manipulative doctors who are going to turn us all into zombies. I would ask, think about the people you've seen. Think about, Dr. Shapiro, Dr. Carpenter, Professor Harrison. Now, they may be evil, manipulative people, or they may not be. But, make your own opinion up about that. As I say, worldwide, it is true, therapies are only allowed to be given if they're proven to be safe and effective. It's also true to say that in the UK, we benefit, maybe, from the NHS. The NHS will not basically pay for drugs unless they're cost effective. And again, it's the same test. Simply drugs, therapies can't be used without them. I really urge you to take part in clinical trials if you're offered. And the reason is simply to help people like you. It's also true, by the way, that different people respond in different ways, so different ethnicities. People from an Indian background or an African background, ancestry or Southeast Asia or whatever, respond to drugs differently. Women respond differently from men. If you are a woman, let's say you come with an ancestry from India, if you want to know whether people like you, women with an Indian ancestry, work with these drugs, or these drugs work with you, women from South Asia have to have tried them. I also want to talk about how clinical trials work, and basically the story of a drug. And the bottom line of this is the clinical trials that people with MPNs are going to be asked to be involved in, almost certainly people know about the side effects really well. So the way that a drug is developed, first of all, people, usually in universities, often spend decades trying to understand the disease. What actually causes MPNs? How did they develop? Then people spend typically 5-10 years trying to develop a molecule, let's say ruxolitinib, that they hope will basically help treat the disease without many side effects. And they do absolutely everything they can to understand that. They put it through computer modeling, through AI modeling. They put it into Petri dishes. They put it into mice or other animals. But in the end, it has to go into humans. Typically, there are 3 phases of drugs. Phase 1 is incredibly unlikely you're going to be involved in this. The basic point of a phase 1 trial is it's safe. First time it's put into a human. Typically, these trials are 5 to 15 people, usually healthy medical students. Unlikely to be us lot. Then you have phase 2 trials, which are basically, again, is it safe? Does it seem to work? What sort of dose is right? And again, with MPN drugs, you're typically talking about 50 people involved in this sort of trial. And then you'll need what are called phase 3 trials. These are trials basically to provide convincing statistical proof that something is adequately safe and adequately effective. These are typically, in the case of MPNs, hundreds of people, but sometimes these trials are thousands. The biggest one I know of is basically early detection of cancer. It's in the NHS. It's 140,000 people taking part. These are the ones you're likely to be involved in. They're randomized, usually. Some people get the best. This is going back to a point I've made before. Doctors, clinicians, researchers only do these things if they have a strong belief they're going to work. And not only work, they're going to be better. No drug, by the way, is ever approved unless it's better in some way than the previous ones. So they're testing it because they think it's better. If you're on a clinical trial, I mean, depending how they're defined, half the people will get the drug that people think is better. They don't know for sure, but they think is better or has fewer side effects. And half the people get the best treatment anyway, that's available anyway. There are also lots of trials like methylphenidate, which are about repurposing drugs. So with that, this is about ruxolitinib. People know what the side effects of ruxolitinib are anyway. The question is, can it help with PV? Or can you persuade the NHS to pay for it? As I say, that's how clinical trials work. I personally haven't been on a trial. I'm a patient rep on one. So these points are all coming from my good friend, Toby Alexander. I've said in the past, the number one reason, I strongly believe this, we will benefit from people who've been involved in trials in the past. We can help people like us in the future. There are also pros and cons from an absolutely purely selfish reason. Now, the pros, and this is coming back to what Mary was saying, lots of people here are not treated in the best centres. I mean, Guy's, where I'm treated, is a great centre, but lots of people don't live near Guy's or don't live near Oxford. If you go on a clinical trial, you will be treated in the best possible way. You will get much more attention. You will be tested in huge numbers of ways you wouldn't normally be tested in. It's incredibly thorough. People will take more time with you. And particularly, if you start off like I do at Guy's, you're already getting very good attention, but you'll get even more attention. If you live in, I'm making this up here, rural Wales, or rural Australia, because this is going out everywhere, you will probably not see a haematologist who's really expert in MPNs. If you're on a trial, you will. Now, there are obviously downsides of it, and the biggest downside is time. You may have to travel a long way to get to the centre. You will be prodded and poked and tested, and it's not fun. We all know that. You'll have it precisely because you're getting more attention and you're getting tested more, you're going to be waiting around longer for doing that. At the same time, it can be quite unpredictable about when you're expected to come in, whether the hospital is actually correctly set up as efficiently as it should have been. In addition, and this is this is a point several people make, you'll probably be expected to keep a diary of when exactly you took the drug, how you were feeling, and I personally find that a complete pain. And obviously, you should want to do it as accurately as possible, which isn't always the case. But as I say, there are pros and cons of taking part. I hear again and again, I don't want to do it because I don't want to be a guinea pig. I don't want to do it because I'm worried that some evil scientist is manipulating me. I emphasize again, you've seen the scientists, you've seen the doctors. If you think they're evil, don't take part. But, I'll leave that for your judgment. Again and again, people are doing this because they think the drugs are better. Drugs simply will not get approved if they're not in some way better. So there's a good chance you're going to receive what people believe are better. They don't finally know, but they believe. Regardless, you will receive closer attention from people who really knows about your disease area. And the big worry is actually how much time there is involved from you. For me, that's the most important downside. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Happy to answer any questions. Do, by the way, call me or email me. Very happy to share this presentation or indeed anything else. Thank you very much.